Hey guys, what's going on? It's Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. Want to jump on a live here and share something with you guys that I discovered over the weekend. Basically a podcast by one of my favorite authors and online personalities, Tim Ferriss. Huge supporter of Tim Ferriss. Read 4 Hour Workweek back in 2009. Probably read it 20, 30 times since then, and referenced it at least that many times on top of that. And the funny thing is, when I discovered Tim Ferriss, when I discovered the other gentleman I'm about to talk about, Nassim Taleb, and I read The Black Swan in 2009, reading about Nassim Taleb led me to Tim Ferriss, because at one point I read an interview with Taleb, and they asked him, how do you, what's like your daily routine, or how do you do your work every day? Like, how do you approach work every day? And Taleb said, read a book called The 4 Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, and you'll know how I work every day. And I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. Let me read that. So that's how I found these two guys, literally back to back in 2009. First Taleb, read The Black Swan, and then Tim Ferriss read 4 Hour Workweek. So fast forward to the present, and Tim Ferriss had Taleb on his podcast, a very successful podcast now that Ferriss runs, episode 691, and I think it came out literally like last week or something. It's like in September of this year was the publication date of the podcast. But anyway, he had Taleb and a Wall Street Journal reporter by the last name Patterson. I think his first name is Scott. And Scott Patterson wrote a book that just came out in June, I think, called Chaos Kings, and it talked about how traders like Nassim Taleb, who's no longer a trader, doesn't even want to be identified as such, but once did do that profession. It was talking about how traders like him profit off of extreme events by understanding risk and understanding how to craft investments that are sensitive to extreme risk. And so what was so ironic about it on many levels was the fact that I'd just been thinking about Taleb and when his next book was going to come out and what he was up to, and then sure enough he shows up in this podcast. And then of course it was very ironic that both Taleb and Ferriss obviously were involved in this podcast because of the relationship between the two of them that I had come across. And then the other ironic thing was I'd recently posted for you guys, I think it was on YouTube, maybe I did it also here on Facebook, but I talked about another guy that Taleb had debated at one point called Didier Sornette. And Didier Sornette, who I think is like a physicist slash mathematician, slash extreme risk analyzer, whatever he is, he debated Taleb about extreme events. And he debated Taleb on the basis of Taleb saying you can't predict these extreme events. You can only be sort of antifragile to them, do your best to survive them and maybe benefit from them. Whereas Sornette was saying you absolutely can predict these things, and he had a different term for them called Dragon King. So basically, like a Dragon King, it's a dragon because it's a unique event, and it's a king because it's large scale. So he considered like the 2008 housing market crash / stock market crash / credit crisis / economic meltdown as a Dragon King. But again, he comes at it from the side of you can predict these things. You can see these things coming if you look at certain factors and stuff. So I had just posted about Dragon Kings like a week or two ago. I think I actually used the title, like, what the fuck is a Dragon King? Or something like that. I was explaining it in my post, at a high level. And then I come across this podcast where they're talking to the two guys, where Tim Ferriss is talking to the two guys that were debating this topic, talking to Sornette and talking to a reporter who talked to Sornette, who talked to Taleb, who talked about how certain individuals know how to benefit off of chaotic events like that. So it was a really, really, really interesting podcast. It's one that I actually need to peel back a little bit more with you guys. I can't cover everything in one live session. One little tidbit that's worth sharing right away that I thought was very, very interesting was at one point, Ferriss asks Taleb, like, how, like there's a fund out there that you have a relationship with called Universa. that puts on this black swan hedging trade, how do the rest of us do it? You know what I mean? Like how, how should the rest of us protect against these extreme events and stuff? And Taleb basically comes out and says, you shouldn't. Like, you shouldn't do it. Like, you don't know what you're doing. I mean, not, speaking directly to Tim Ferriss, but he was like, most people don't understand financial markets. They don't understand risk. They understand the thing they do. They understand, baking if they're a baker. They understand, accounting if they're an accountant. They don't understand financial markets and extreme risk, so they shouldn't be making this black swan hedging trade that the fund that Taleb advises or has some kind of relationship with, Universa, the trade that they specialize in. And I was kind of surprised at that. I was actually kind of surprised he said that it's not even worth attempting to do it. So, because I have attempted to do it, and I've had minor success and major failure at doing it, to be totally frank with you guys. So anyway, really, really super interesting. I got to peel that back even further, the whole thing about the trade and all that stuff. I got to talk to you guys more about that. I got to listen to this podcast again, or read this book, or just kind of mull it over some more, because there's just layers to some of the things he was saying about how they do this trade and why they do it the way they do it, and who fails at it and who's successful with it. So I will definitely have more for you guys on this topic. I mean, this is one of the most fascinating things that I've come across in the last decade and a half, is learning about black swan theory and following Taleb and all the math terms that come with it. I mean, it's just for a history major like myself, it's overwhelming, but it's enjoyable. So anyway, thanks for listening, guys. Until next time, we'll definitely have more for you guys on this topic going forward. But thanks for checking this out, guys.